to this Lightroom walkthrough. This is actually a pre-recording of a workshop. I've done this because there is so much information here, and it takes really so much time to cover. There's no way you could cover it in a workshop. So our workshop will cover whatever we can. We'll leave time to ask questions because that's the advantage of having a live workshop. But I'm putting this out there so that those questions that don't get answered can be answered in this video. I'll also have a live timeline with this video so that you can get in there and use the timeline to get right to the question that the area that you're interested in. Okay, this is part of our Kingwood Photo Club library series, which we do every month. Let's start off with a little disclaimer. Like I said, there's too much here to cover, so we won't even try. This is a walkthrough. We'll explore Lightroom, and I pre-recorded this thing, but I want to give you guys questions. I'm asking for questions in this workshop, and please ask those questions. Our agenda in this meeting, I'm going to start off with a little presentation here, a very short one, on how the catalog works. If you already know this, you can skip directly ahead, as I said in the timeline. But it's important to understand how the catalog works, because without understanding that, you're not going to understand Lightroom very well. We'll then talk about setting up Lightroom. We'll talk about setting up preferences, different viewing options, things like that. We'll then get into the library module about importing, organizing, or exporting your images. And then finally, we'll get into the develop module. We'll talk about editing. We will not get into some of the other modules like the slideshow module and the book module, which I also use, and I think they're very good. On the right-hand side of this slide, you can see an agenda that I put together for myself to keep me on track. There's a lot of things to cover. Let's get going. How does the catalog work? Okay, key to understanding Lightroom is understanding the catalog. All right. Well, first thing you do is obviously you import images into some place on your hard drive. So the original files go into something on the hard drive. Then your files come off your SD card, or it comes off your flash drive, or some other way. And if you're using your iPad, for example, and Adobe's cloud, it may be coming off the cloud itself. But anyways, those files do go into some place on your hard drive. It's a physical location. When that happens, the catalog, which is the heart of Lightroom, imports the images into the catalog and keeps track of where they are. The physical images themselves actually don't go into the catalog. All the catalog does is keeps track of where those images are. All right. And at the same time that those images are tracked in the catalog will also build some smart preview files, or not smart. They'll build small preview files, so that you can see those images in the grid view and things like that. Okay. As we go forward, then. You'll find that there's more in the folder where the original files are, contains more than just the original files. Okay, you can see the list here. I've got files like CAD7342.NEF. That's a Nikon RAW file. And next to that, there's another file, 7342.XMP. Well, for proprietary files, like the Nikon RAW file, or the Canon RAW file, or the Sony RAW file, Adobe Lightroom will not write information on that file. It keeps it pristine, but it puts next to that file a little XMP file. It's a text file, it's a simple file, and what it keeps on that XMP file is standard information like the author, resolution, color space, copyright, keywords. So that XMP file travels along with the RAW file everywhere it goes. If you import, and during the import process, you convert your files to DNG, for example, and there is an option to do that, and we'll show you the import dialog later on, or they're JPEG files. The information that information we just talked about is actually embedded within the file itself. All right. The edits are not embedded though. Okay. Anything you do to edit is not embedded in the file, but information such as the author and things like that is embedded in the file. So you can see here in this list, you can see some JPEG files, some DNG files, and you don't see any XMP file right there with it. When you view your images in Loupe View and Grid View, Loupe or Grid View, you're going to be looking at a preview file, not the actual image itself. So those previews are used because they come up quickly, and you're not editing them specifically, you're just viewing them. You're looking at some image previews. When you edit the file, though, however, it does bring up your original file. Okay, you're not editing your original file. It edits your file by when you change the slider positions to edit something like brightness or white balance or whatever you're doing, those changes in slider positions are remembered in the catalog. You can have the edits though added to the sidecar file. Remember that little XMP file for the JPEGs, the DNG, and if you and also you can have it in the sidebar file for the proprietary files if you set that up in the preferences catalog settings. In fact, down below in the green bar, I'm saying I suggest you actually turn this option on, because that way all your edits are remembered in a separate file along with your images. And if should you ever lose your catalog, which also has the edits in them, if you lose your catalog, you're just re-importing those images along with the XMP files and with the embedded information, the JPEG and the DNG files. You'll recapture. You won't lose your edits, so it protects you against losing the catalog. There is one caveat, however. It may affect performance. So as Lightroom is going through and writing the information on the XMP files all the time, it may slow it down a bit. I have not found that personally to be the case, but there is that danger, if you will. All right. There's one other way you can edit files, which is pretty nice little idea there. Something called smart previews. Remember, initially when you imported the images, Lightroom created previews. They were dumb previews, if you will. They were just preview files. They were small thumbnails of your file. You can convert those into smart previews, and what that allows you to do is if your original images reside on an external hard drive, for example, and you're using a laptop, and you want to go downstairs, you want to go on a trip or something like that, and you want to take your laptop with you, and you want to continue editing the files, but you don't want to take your hard drive with you, you can do that. You convert the images to smart previews. You can then edit those smart previews, and when you reattach your laptop to the hard drive, those edits are reassociated back to the original file. So you can actually edit without being attached to the original files if you have smart previews. And I'll try to show you how that's done too when we get into the editing process. Now you can manage your files. That is, you can move them, you can copy them, you can delete them and everything within Lightroom. And when you do that, as you move them around, the Lightroom catalog will keep track of whatever you do. So if you delete a file, it'll remember that. If you move a file, it remembers that. Or if you create new folders or delete folders, it remembers that. So do it within Lightroom. The point is, don't do it outside of Lightroom. Because if I go outside of Lightroom and use my file manager and delete and move images around in different folders, the catalog doesn't know what I'm doing. It has no way of knowing that. So next time I attach to Lightroom, it won't know where those files are. So whatever you do in the files, once you've created the catalog, make sure you do all your moving, changing, deleting, everything else within Lightroom itself. You know, a real nice feature, and we talk about files all the time, of Lightroom is to create virtual copies. Virtual copy of a file is simply a virtual copy. It's not a real copy of the file, it's a virtual copy. And what that allows you to do is you can create a file and edit it separately without taking up any space on your hard drive. So for example, if I have a nice picture and I'd like to edit and create a black and white version of that picture, I can do that. I create a virtual copy of it, which takes up no room. I can edit the virtual copy of that picture and do whatever I want to it. So now I've got a black and white copy and a color copy, and I can print them both off. So virtual copies take up no room, and they allow you to go ahead and do something else with that same picture, which is very nice. Now, when you want to print or share your images, you need to export them. So the only time that the catalog actually applies the changes to an image and makes them permanent is when you actually export the file. You can export them different ways. Lightroom takes your original images, applies the edits, and creates whatever file you want wherever you want it. So it could be a JPEG file or a TIFF file or a PSD file or the original file. You export it with those changes to either you can export them to your desktop and then print them and send them off by email to anybody. And if you want to send them, as I began to say before, to Flickr or Facebook or other locations, your own website, for example, there are some built-in publication plugins that you can use. And those built-in plugins are available on the Lightroom base model, but they also are available from Adobe or other locations that you can find out on the web. Now, backing up your catalog, Lightroom will automatically back up the catalog. As you specify in preferences, in preferences you'll say I want to do it weekly, I want to do it monthly, or I want to do it every time I shut down the system. It does not back up the files, though. It backs up the catalog. Remember, the catalog is not the files. Your original images are over there sitting there, not backed up. So you have to have your own backup system to do that. I personally use the Adobe. I use a Mac, so I use Apple's backup system, and I also use a cloud backup system called Backblaze. So I back up my files on the cloud, and I also have them backed up on a separate hard drive. And I'll do that. The other thing, by default, Adobe puts the backups in a folder called Backups in the same area as your catalog. I would suggest that you keep your catalog on your internal hard drive, since it'll run faster. But I wouldn't keep my backups on that hard drive inside. It's not a smart place to keep your backups right next to the catalog, because should your hard drive go bad, the whole reason you have backups is your hard drive goes bad. Your catalog will certainly be damaged, but you don't want your backups to also be damaged, right? So it's a good thing to put those on a separate drive somewhere. And how do you do that? Well, it's not done easily. It's not sitting there in the preferences area where you can say I prefer to put backup somewhere else. What you have to do is you have to wait for the little backup window to pop up the first time or the second time. Every time it goes to back up your files, when you exit Lightroom, a little pop-up will pop up occasionally, depending on how often you've set that, and say, do you want to do the backup? On that little window, there's an option to change the location of the backup as to where you want to put it. Once you've changed it the first time, it'll stay changed. So go ahead and change the location of the backup files when that window opens. Okay. So that's the end of the explanation of the catalog itself. Let's get a little bit into organizing your images in the library module. I've got just 2 more slides here that I want to talk about in terms of before we get into actually looking at Lightroom itself. The first one has to do all those menu items above. I use these slides here because it's a little easier for me to outline and show you things on these slides than it is on the live Lightroom window. Just know that there is a menu system above on Lightroom, and also know that there's corresponding controls and shortcuts and everything else that go along with these menus. You don't actually have to open and use those menu items. I don't find I open them very often at all, but there are times I do open them, and I've got those highlighted here. First thing, you'll see those little red circles around there. The red circles are shortcuts. I learned some of those shortcuts. You don't have to learn all of them, but learn them because it's a fast way to get to that menu item without opening the menus themselves. Where I have those boxes, such as preferences, open and catalog, etc., I do once in a while use those, and I haven't found another location in Lightroom where you can get to them quickly. The preferences you'll probably use initially when you set up. You may use them again sometime, but rarely after that. Opening catalog, when you first set up Lightroom on your PC or your Mac, and or say for example you're transferring from one computer to the next, you copy your catalog and all your files over to the new computer, and then you open up Lightroom and you'll say open catalog. Open catalog, you'll click on that and then point to the catalog that you opened up, and it'll pick up that catalog. It'll know where all the pictures are and go from there. Import from another catalog, export to it as a catalog. I use that when I travel a lot. If I'm with my laptop, I have 2 computers. One's a laptop and one's a desktop. I'm using my laptop on the trip, and I'm taking pictures, and every night I load my pictures on the laptop and edit them. Coming home on the airplane, I'll do a lot of edits too and have some fun doing that. When I get home, I'll then use export as catalog. I'll select all my pictures on the trip, say export as catalog, and put them on some external hard drive. Okay? Then when I've done that, I take that external hard drive, I plug it into my desktop in my home computer, and I say import from another catalog. I point to that catalog, and those pictures all get imported into my desktop system. So I use that to transfer pictures between the 2 different computers. Over there on the right-hand side, library, show photos and subfolders. I'll try to get into that when we get into the Lightroom. There's just different ways of showing the images, and for that one I usually click on the top and use that little button there. There's more menu items here. There's more shortcuts as shown. The ones I use a lot, and I use the shortcuts a lot, I don't use the boxes so much, is things like the star ratings, the color ratings. I use that a lot. Cropping, I use R. Go to developed, I use D. Grid is G. And we'll use some of these shortcuts as we go around Lightroom and demonstrate. Remember I talked about saving files to XMP, saving the changes to the XMP files. If it affects performance and you decide you don't want to do that, there's another way of doing that. Look at the second box. There's a box there that says Save Metadata to Files. You can do a lot of editing, for example, then select all the pictures you've edited, and then click on Save Metadata to Files. That'll save all your changes, your edits, to the files themselves. It's the same as having them all saved to the XMP file that you would have selected before, except this doesn't affect performance. It might take a little time. If you have a lot of files, when you click Save Metadata Files, you may want to go off and get some coffee or something like that, if this takes a while. But that basically does the same thing. It'll back up your changes on the files themselves. Okay, so there you go. There's some things I've shown up there. There's another one down there in the left-hand box. Delete rejected photos. When I use the pick and reject flags, coming home from a trip, if I want to reject some photos, I use pick and reject, and then when I get home, I review what I've rejected, and then I select delete rejected photos, and it cleans off my disk. So let's get on to actually viewing Lightroom itself. Well, welcome back. We've had our overview of the catalog and how it works. Now we're going to get into Lightroom and actually use the system, demonstrate, and do the walkthrough that we talked about and we advertised for the course. First of all, we're going to start off with the library module. You can see up, this is what I'm looking at here is the library module in Lightroom. You can tell because its library is showing up pretty clearly here. So that's right up above the library module. If you can't see it, there it is. There's the develop module we're going to go into, and we won't go into these other modules over here. All right. What I'm going to do first of all is give you a little round trip here. Okay. But before we do that, let's talk about settings. We talked about settings before. So we're in catalog in Lightroom here. I'll hit Lightroom Classic above. Go into Preferences or Catalog Settings. First of all, we'll go into Catalog Settings. In Catalog Settings, I'm going to check on metadata first. Okay, first of all, let's before I do that, look at the backup here. I'm backing up once a week. You have a choice of when you back up. Where I back up, it's going to back up unless I tell it otherwise next to where the catalog is. When this does come up and gets ready to back up the next time, you can change it. So you can't change it here. There's nowhere to change where the backup goes. You can only tell it where. How often. When it does come up, though, and asks you, do you want to back up, that's what the time you can change the location, and it'll stay changed. Metadata. Let's just click on metadata. Okay, and one of the things I like to keep checked is automatically write changes to XMP. We talked about this a little bit when we went over the catalog. And what this means is there's a text file that goes along when you have JPEGs and TIFFs and PSD files. The develop settings, in other words, the edit settings, are included in those files right there. Okay, but for the proprietary files such as Nikon's NEF file, or I think it's Canon's files, or the proprietary files for Sony, those things, the changes are not included here. They're included in the catalog. So if you want the changes to be included in the XMP file, which I do suggest, is make sure that that's checked, and that's not checked by default. And the reason for that is performance issues. Okay, so I would suggest you do check that. Okay, that would be one thing I would check. Now the alternative to that, if you do have performance issues once you check that, there is a way around that, and that's to go up to metadata up here on the top. Once you've edited a bunch of pictures, click on the first one. Hold down your shift key, click on the last one. Okay, now I'm going to take all those datas there. Now I can go to metadata, and I can then say there is to save metadata to files. That has the same effect. It saves the metadata to the file itself and also to the XMP file. So that's something you can do if you're getting performance issues, and you can do it after the fact. All right. let's go back now and do a little bit more on the setup, okay? We'll go to Lightroom Classic and go to Preferences. Okay, what do I suggest in Preferences? For one, under the General Settings here, General Settings, I like to treat the JPEG file next to the RAW file as a separate photo. Sometimes if your camera gives you the ability to take RAW plus JPEG, Lightroom will bring them both in, but it'll hide the JPEG and just show you the RAW file. This way you've got them you'll be looking at two different files here. When you look at your desktop, you'll see two files next to each other, one JPEG and one RAW file. I like to do that. It's just clear in my mind. The other thing I like to do is go to External Editing here. Now, Adobe Photoshop is going to be set up for you as your primary external editor. Make sure it's set to PSD. A lot of times, I think by default it might be TIFF. PSD is Adobe's default format. I like PFD. I think it saves smaller than a TIFF. This should be Pro Photo. If it's not changed, it's going to probably be sRGB or something. I'd change it to Pro Photo. It's a wider color gamut, 16-bit and 240. That I would set up. If you have an external editor, such as Luminar, like I have here, okay, what you can do is make sure that you set this one up. You can choose by going over here and choosing in your applications folder what the application is. It'll choose. I chose Luminar, and then I also set it up PSD, Pro Photo, 16 bits and 240, same thing. And then what I also do is when I do edit in one of these editors, I like it to come out and stack with the original. In other words, it creates a stack of the two images. That's easier to find. The other stuff I wouldn't worry too much about across here. Performance might be an issue if you're having speed issues, and this is where you're going to find that you may want to change the size of your cache or purge the cache, things like that. Those are if you're having some performance issues. We won't get into that right now. All right. And then the other thing I would do, we're still talking about setting up here. The next thing I would do is I would go into View, up above, right? Bring down the View options. And this gives you some options here too. View options is what you see on the screen and how you want to see it. Right now, for example, I've got this compact cell extras and expanded. I've chosen to use expanded cells. You can see that these are called expanded cells. If I were to choose compact cells, you'll see the pictures change over there. They're different. I don't particularly like that view. I like expanded cells. That's my own personal preference. And when I do the expanded cells, I'll say down here, down below here, that these are the things I want to have show up on the cell box up here. So, for example, file name, right? I don't have anything showing up here. I could put something there I guess. I could have the dimensions of the thing and the size of it. Typically, that's what I'd like. You could put exposure. You could put a lot of other stuff there if you'd like. And then you show the ratings footer. I like to do that. These stars and colors. I like to have those there. The ratings and the stars. I like to have that on the picture also. That again is an option. You can have it or not have it. And then the other thing is the Loupe View. All right. If I click on Loupe View, it goes to Loupe View here. Way to go back and forth from Grid View to Loupe View. Let's just take that off. If I want to see Loupe View, okay, I can hit the space bar, okay, and I come up in Loupe View, space bar. Now the view, you go back to View Options. For Loupe, you also have two different Loupe views, 1 and 2, and you toggle between the two of them by hitting the I shortcut key. So I'm right now in Info 1. I've got the file name, as you can see, the megapixels, and the crop dimensions. If I want to see 2, I'd have file name, exposure, ISO, and lens settings. So if I were to go back here and hit I, it'll change back and forth, toggle back and forth. Okay, so that's the Loupe view. And to get back to the grid view, the other shortcut now is G. To go to the Loupe view, the shortcut key is space, and then I can toggle between the different views up above. All right, so back to grid view. So those are the setup. That's how I'd set up this thing. I'd choose my views, preferences. I would treat JPEG as a separate file, and I do external editing. I put Luminar in there. And for catalog choices, I would choose to auto-write the changes to XMP. All right. So those are the basic options. There are some other options you can have down here. You can notice down here on the bottom bar, or you can see the bottom bar down here. I have things like star ratings and colors. So if I click on a particular picture and I want to change them, I can click down here. I can click on the picture. So it's redundant, but the way you change what's down here on the bottom bar, okay, is by clicking this little down arrow here on the side and choosing what you want to see down there. Okay, I've got things like color labels and rating and things like that, and flags down here too. These are flags. So again, you can choose what you want to have down on the bottom, and then that's what I like to have. Then down the top, the top options bar, or the top bar up here. Okay, you have a couple of things you can do. If I go at the very top of these menus are, if I right-click on that, I can choose what to show. For example, I've removed web from there. There's another module called web. I don't use it, so I right-click on that and I unclick there. I do use these other modules. The only reason I unclick it is why I have it there if I'm not going to use it, right? So that's the top menu. Now let's go back down and start looking at these sidebar menus here. All right, there's the Navigator at the very top, and you'll see I can close the Navigator, open the Navigator, and any image I'm on shows up in the Navigator over here. The nice thing of the Navigator is I can also zoom in on the hit, click, fit, and so I can zoom in and out that way. If I'm zoomed in, for example, I can move around the image, check it out this way by moving it. So this Navigator allows me to do that kind of thing. When I get into the Develop module later on, I'll show you that Navigator has additional functions. It's also in the Develop module, it has additional functions. Now let's go down to the next one, Catalog. Okay, if I open up Catalog, you'll notice Folders closes. Okay, I have this set up. Let me click on any one of these bars here. I'll right-click on it. I have this set up with Solo Mode on it. Solo Mode means if I click on one of these to open up, the others close. If I click off Solo Mode, I can have Catalog open and Folders open, and I can have everything open, right? I can go down here, I can have Collections open. The trouble with that is everything's open now and it's confusing as hell, I think. So it's easier if I right-click, go to Solo Mode, and I'll have one thing open at a time. Right now it's Folders, Catalog. I can do Catalog, all right? So let's just go through here and look at this left bar a little bit. So let me go see what I'm side menu Solo Mode. As I told you that, Navigator, Catalog Panel, the Catalog Panel here. How many photographs do I have? If I click on that, it shows me all the photographs. There's 53,000. All the synced photos, I do sync my photos through Adobe Cloud with my iPad, so I've got 2,444 photos being synced across to my iPad. All sync errors. Some of these photos are errors. I'd have to investigate exactly why these are sync errors. And then there's no quick collection. I have nothing in the quick collection. I don't use quick collections too much, but I think the shortcut key is something like B to put an image in a quick collection. So if you're trying to collect a couple of quick images and you're rummaging through them, you can put them into a quick collection by I think it's the shortcut key B. I'm not totally sure. Previous import, it says previous import. I brought in 19 pictures. Previous export is a catalog. We'll get into what that is later. And added by previous export. Okay, so that's the catalog area. Don't use that very much. That's usually closed up. I do use folders a lot. The folders are the physical location where the images are on my hard drive. Collections are collections of images based on other criteria. For example, keywords or star ratings or things, or no criteria at all. Pictures I just happen to move into a collection. So for example, if I'm making a book over here in the book module, I might move a bunch of pictures into a collection and then use that collection as the basis for that book. Let me look at folders. Okay, here's folders. You can see I've got some of my items are on my hard drive and then on my computer. Some of my items are on an external hard drive I call workspace, and that's where most of my images are. You can see that's 52,000 there, and I've got about 1,100 there. Now you'll notice here that you can change the view of how many images show up in these folders and whether or not the top folder contains all the images from the one below that by simply going to let's see, let me go to library. show images, photos, and subfolders. I'm going to uncheck that. Now you'll notice that there's no image at the very top, because there isn't. All my images are in folders down below, and this is normally the way I've got it. Okay, if I want to see how many images are in particular folders and everything below them, I can use the other option there, right? Show images and subfolders. Now it shows at the very top level I've got 52,300 something, and if I go back and do it just the opposite, it shows 0 there. All right, hope you understood that. What else do we have? In terms of creating folders and things like this, if I go to Workspace, and it'll show the photo counts, things like this. If I go to a particular folder, let's just say this thing is called Amical Golf here, and I right-click on that, I can create a folder inside that gives me, the right-click allows me to do a lot of different things here, okay? And that's why I said before that a lot of these menu items are up here, except that you can really just, using right-clicks and things like this down below, get the same result. I can rename the folder. Okay, I can remove the folder. If I remove the folder, it's just taking it out of the catalog and saying, hey, catalog, forget this folder. It's not removing the pictures, okay? Synchronizing folder, that's an interesting thing to do. So if you've moved some pictures into a particular folder and you want Lightroom to find them, okay, I can say, okay, Lightroom, I haven't done this in this case, but maybe let's look. If I say Lightroom synchronize this Amical Golf folder here, it'll go through now. It's importing. It did find 5 pictures, okay, that were in there that were not in the catalog. It'll show the import catalog. So I can now say, okay, yeah, bring those in. I want to see them. So it's going to go out there and bring those 5 pictures in. You'll see the progress bar up above working. It's found those 5 pictures, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It hasn't rendered them. There it is. Okay, so it has found 5 pictures. I didn't know they were in there. But if you ever want to do that, check your folders to make sure there's no pictures in there that you haven't gotten. And then after you do that, you hit import, and those pictures will come in. Okay. Now, when you do get pictures in like this, and if you're sitting here and you're wondering where the picture is, what folder is this picture in? Okay. Let me go back. This picture's in the Amical folder. I know that, but where is it down here? Which folder is it in? I can go to the picture itself. Let's just say this one here. Anyone. Right-click on the picture and say show that. Go to the folder in the library where this picture is. I want to see this picture in the library itself. There it is. Okay, it's highlighted. So, and you can see it's in this Wisconsin 2013 folder. That particular picture. So that's the way you could find where the picture is. All right, we've talked about folders here. Folders are the physical locations where the pictures are. Now let's talk about another way of organizing pictures called collections. One thing that is a little confusing if you use the other Lightroom, where this is Lightroom Classic, but if you use Lightroom, just plain Lightroom, that's the version that runs on the cloud, they actually use collections there versus folders, and I think they call them folders or files or something. But the collections here are or whatever you define them to be. For example, there are things like smart collections and dumb collections. The way you create a collection, you can subtract or add here. So if I want to create a new collection, I will say, okay, I want to create a collection. Just create a dumb collection. Then what I do if I create a collection like this is I can take pictures over here, for example, anywhere, and out of any folder. It doesn't have to be these particular pictures here, and I can just get them and move them into a collection just by clicking and dragging them across. Okay, I won't do that, but that would be one way of getting the pictures into a particular collection. Those would be dumb collections, right? If I create a smart collection, or a collection set. A collection set is the higher level of collections. A collection set of collections below that. So, for example, I have best images here, and below that I have 5-star, 4-star, etc. Okay, this is a set. But to create another collection here, I can say, let's say I want to create a smart collection. All right, I hit smart collection. I'll test. I'll just call that test. But call it whatever I want. Inside this collection set, I want it to be inside this collection set or not. Okay, but I'll leave it. I'll say, yeah, I'll put it in that collection set. I want it to match all these criteria. I want rating to be equal 2 or better than 1 or 2. Okay, then I'll also add another criteria here. I'll say I want color label to be I want that to be yellow, green. For me, a green color label means it's finished. So anything with 2 stars that's completed and been edited, I want in this collection. There's one other thing I might say. I know that I use a folder for exporting images. I call it the uploads folder, and I'll say, let's see, location. City, no, I don't want location. File name for this. Okay, copy file name source. Okay, source. I want this. I don't want the folder if the source contains or does not contain. So I only want these to come from any folder that does not contain the word uploads in it. That way, I don't want it to pick any files from uploads. See if I have any of these. Okay, so I'm creating this test best images here. You can just see it just collected 3,388 pictures. If I go into test and click, you can see this has collected everything that's 2 stars and above. Okay, I can change this now and say, okay, I didn't mean all 2 stars and above. I want this to be equal to. It is 2 stars. Only 2-star pictures here. You can see it's changed the number again. Only 2-star pictures that are green, that's not in that folder. All right. So this goes around and selects all those pictures. Now, if I right-click on test there, I can rename it, or I can delete that collection. Okay. So I've just deleted that collection. It's off. So that's essentially what collections are. If you have dumb collections, you create a collection that has no intelligence to it, but you just move pictures into it. And the reason you use collections, for example, is I'll put together a bunch of pictures that, for example, I want to use in the book module later on here, or whatever. I got black and white pictures, for example, things like that. So there's a lot of reasons to use these things. You can do things. Let's see. There's another set of here I have best pictures here of the different years. Best pictures of wildlife, best pictures of, so for a particular year, for example, 2018, if I look at that, I'll say if the rating is 5-star, it was captured between these particular dates and has the keyword street on it. I want that in there. So these are my best street pictures from that year. It's a nice way of creating smart, collecting your pictures and finding your pictures. All right, that's a really good thing. Now that's collections on this side. Remember, we're in the solo mode. So if I go down to the bottom here, there's one more thing down here called Publish Services. If I want to publish pictures to say Flickr, my Flickr account here, I've got pictures being published. All I have to do is drag pictures in here from anywhere, and they'll be published. Okay, then I'll hit Publish down below, and it'll send it up to Flickr for me. Same thing with SmugMug. And there are other plugins. You can find other plugins in here out on the web. Adobe has a bunch of them that you can get to do different things. And that's it for that side menu. Let's go down the other side here. So we've looked up above at this menu item. We've gone down this side here. We looked a little bit about setting up this menu, the menu item down below. All right. Let's go now to the right-hand side. The top you'll see histogram. You'll see this in the develop module also. Quick develop is something I never use. I'm not sure why they have it here. I'm sure there's some little things you can do, exposure, clarity stuff. But when the only thing you have to do is move over to develop and get that done, I'm not sure why you would want to use quick develop, but there must be a reason for it. I've never used it. Keywording is an important part of pictures. Of finding your pictures. These particular pictures there's nothing clicked, so I just clicked on this one. This one's black and white, lighthouses. It's in Maine, New England, and it's something I had up in Shutterstock. So that's Shutterstock is a website that sells pictures. So these are images, and each one has its own set of keywords in there. The list of all the keywords I have, if I go down below, and it does give me some suggested keywords here that I can use. To put a keyword in, all you have to do is put a comma in there and start typing. All right. If I select a bunch of pictures, for example, let me just do a group of pictures. Select the first one, space, select the last one. You'll notice that this does pick up all the keywords in all these pictures. These little asterisks that you see The little asterisk that you see, for example, behind some of these pictures means that the tag is only applied, as it says there, to some selected photos, not all of them. All right, in this list that I have here. Now, keyword list. Okay, so if I go back and look at the keyword list of all the keywords that I have in the system, you'll notice there's quite a few here. Right? These keywords are important to finding things. You realize I do have some pictures selected here. So when I do have pictures selected, it's telling me that this keyword exists in this group of selected pictures here. Okay, I have 11 birds. I've got 1,168 pictures with that keyword on it, but there's some right here in this group. All right, architectures doesn't have any, but black and white does. So if I were to look in here and guess, there's a black and white one right there. So that's essentially what those little items mean. Let me just click off here. That one says it has birds on it. If I want to see all the pictures with birds on it, this side over here, I would not. This check means if I check that off, it'll take the keyword off that picture. If I click with that picture there, and I wanted to put it, I don't want to, but let's say I want to put birds on there. Right now it's black and white. I could click there and give that keyword bird on that picture. So now if I were to go up and look at that particular picture there, it has birds on it. I really don't want to have birds in that picture because there's none there. So what I can do is go back and click birds off on that picture. No longer there. Now if I want to see all the birds pictures or the boats pictures, let's say boats pictures, I'll go to the right hand side here and click that little arrow that you see there. Right? Now if I click that arrow, it's going to come up with boat pictures. So all these pictures have the keyword boat on them. So you can collect pictures that way too if you want to see all your boat pictures. Now I am not as rigorous using keywords as I should be, but I do it. And as you go through here, you can organize these keywords into different things. For example, if I get down to the area of people here, I can open that up, and you can see I've got a lot of different people in here with their. I can find pictures of David Emerson, for example, with him in it. There might be other people in the picture too, but David's in these pictures here. So I can do that. I can find pictures of myself. So that's the people keyword. I also have places that I've been. So if I want to find my Argentine pictures, I can click that and it'll show up Argentine pictures. Now, of course, I can find Argentine pictures also by going to this folder, because the way I organize my folders is a lot of times by shoot name, if you will, or location, because I can remember where I was more than I can remember what time it was or anything else like that. So if I go to, let's close off this, let's close off that, you'll see that most of my folders are places I've been, either cruising, California, birds is cruising, Indonesia. So I remember pictures normally by where I was at the time. So my Myanmar pictures, for example, are in that folder. I could also go over here and probably find Myanmar under places. Myanmar, unfortunately, is having a hard time today because of the military taking over. But that was a beautiful country. So that's how I use my keywords there. Okay. And then down below, sorry, I shouldn't want to do that. Down below keywords, if I go down below keywords here, there are other things here. Metadata. Now metadata is important because you can actually do some different things. This tells you a lot about the picture, the dimensions, when it was taken. You might have even location information in here if your camera has that kind of information, GPS coordinates, for example. You can also rename pictures. So if I were to take that picture and wanted to rename it, for example, I could go right up here, file name, change that file name. If I want to rename a series of pictures, for example, I want to go to take that one all the way down to that one. Okay, it's mixed file name now, but I can click on the little menu pop up next to it, batch renaming. Click on that, and it'll come up, and I can choose different naming conventions here. And then when I say go, it'll name all the pictures accordingly. So if you can take all your pictures, put them in a file, for example, and then name them all like I have here. The date 2015-02 Myanmar, and then the sequence. So that's typical of what I do. All right. So that's renaming it using this metadata. There's another way of renaming pictures. pictures, and is going up to library and going down to rename photos. You can see right here that F2 is the shortcut, so if just hitting F2 would also pop up a window and I can rename pictures that way. Okay, same item, same window pops up. So that's renaming your pictures that way. And now finally, let's get into let's go ahead and get into importing. Importing pictures, then we'll talk about file identification using some of the star ratings and things like that. Let's talk about how you import pictures. Okay, I want to get some pictures in from somewhere else. Obviously, there is a button down here. Again, like I said, there's always menu items to do that, but that's why we don't use these very often. We just go down here and hit the import. Okay, when I hit import, the import dialog opens up. Okay, it took a little while to open up that time. And the way you do import, you start on the left-hand side and select a source. Where do you want to import from? You then come to the middle here, and you say, let me just hold on for a second. You'll say, I want to copy as DNG from that location. I want to just copy it from the location. I want to move it from the location, or leave it at that location and just add it to the catalog. So I have choices up here: source, what I want to do, the action I want to do with it, how I want to move it across, and then on the right hand side where I want to put this. Okay, so I can say I want to put these pictures that are coming in, I want to put that in some location. This opens my file manager. I can say here's where I want to put the pictures. It'll show up down here, or I can select down here also. On the left hand side, source, if I hit source, I say I want to select from it. If I had an SD card put in here, the SD card would show up over here automatically. So I'm going to pick from a source. I'm going to do something with the picture. I'm going to put it in another place. And as the pictures come in, I can say, hey, build smart previews. Remember I said smart previews. If you have that, the picture, you can edit the pictures when your hard drive is not online. I don't normally do that, but you can do that. Don't import suspected duplicates. That's a good idea. You can make a second copy as backup as you import if you want it to another location. You can rename the files coming in. So, for example, if I was in Myanmar, I can say, give me these names as, whatever it is. Give me a custom name, Myanmar 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, or I can edit and come up with my own criteria. I'd like to do, say, for example, I'd like to use image name, custom name, etc. So you can go through and you can create a whole different way of file names, numbering sequences, different things like that. I'd like the date on the file. For example, if I want a date on this thing, I can say insert the date, right? So I want a date on this thing, and that would be, so I can customize the naming of the files as they come in here. The other thing you can do, and it's a good idea to do that too, is you can add apply during import. Put a keyword put your keywords on the files as they come in, so that they're already keyworded. If they're all from Myanmar, or they're all from Italy, or wherever you came from, just go ahead and put those keywords on as the files come in. That's nice. You can even have develop settings. If I've got, I can create some presets and develop settings, put them in as the preset. I'll show you how to do that later, and then select the preset there, so that that develop setting, your edit settings, are applied to every picture coming in. That's another thing you can do. Destination, and that's it. Then once you're done, you're saying done, and this thing will show up as import, and you hit import, and the pictures come in and get put in your catalog. Okay, I'm going to cancel out of that. So that's importing your pictures. And now let's get into file identification, and then we'll get using that identification into sorting and filtering and things like that. And then we'll talk about some key shortcuts to remember before we get out of the library module. File identification. What we're looking at here again is the folders, and I've got Myanmar selected. And you'll notice that a lot of these pictures have green on them. In fact, and some of them have yellow. And then probably some, if I find them, I've really developed all these pictures, will have no coloring at all. So let's go to another folder here. We'll go to Colorado. Okay, you'll see some pictures don't have any coloring on them. Some are green. There's star ratings, things like that. So what what you can do with pictures is use these colors and star ratings to better find your pictures. If I wanted to, I use green to identify a picture that's been finished. I've finished editing. So if I want to go up above here, this filter setting here, I can use that filter setting to find them, and I'll show you in a minute. That's one way I use stars and filter rating, color codes, and keywords. So let's go to filters, off, and I've got one set up that's called green finished, and it's going to pull up all the green finished pictures in that folder. Okay. Now if I want to create a new filter, so it's giving me green pictures, but I only want the green pictures with 5 stars on them, so I don't want that one there. So I'm going to say green pictures with 5 stars. And now that I've done, and I want any that are picked or selected, I can change those there. But once I've got that filter set up the way I want it, I can't actually save that. I could save the current settings as a new preset, and it would show up just like this green here. Like, since I use green, I created that one myself. The other one you can do, for example, here's flagged pictures. There's no flagged ones in there. Filters off. It says back to all pictures again. So that little top menu item allows you to do a lot of different things with finding your pictures too. It's pretty. You can do it by camera information, for example. This is nice too. What pictures were shot with which camera? Now I'm shooting with a Nikon, but there's different cameras here. So if I want to see everything that was shot with my old D70, my God, D70 is an old camera I had many years ago. I still have 72 pictures with a D70 in there. That's the D70. The D7000 is a camera I got after that. It's still an old camera. There's a Samsung. That's my wife's camera. And then unknown camera. I don't know what that is. It was probably an iPhone or something. And then my D70. So these are all pretty old pictures from Colorado, because my newest camera is a D810. So there you have. You can even show what lenses you used. Focal length was used. Whether or not the flash was there. So there's different things you can do. Let me take the filters off. So these filters up here help you find pictures, and if you do use things like keywords and colors and stars, that'll help you a lot. So will the collections over on the left. Now before we leave the library module, let's talk about some shortcuts. I already talked about a bunch of them, but let's do that. There's a lot of things you can do by just simply right-clicking on things. We showed you the right-clicking over here on the folders. If I go to a picture here and right-click on the picture, it shows me a bunch of things that show up down here. For example, edit in Photoshop, or edit in Photoshop, or edit in Luminar. Or if I've selected several pictures, for example, if I select 2 pictures and I right-click, it can say edit in and bring in as layers in Photoshop, or merge to HDR Pro. So there's a lot of things that these will do. These photo merge things will merge to Panorama or HDR. Now, of course, these 2 pictures wouldn't make sense to do that. But that right-clicking is a good trick. It's the same as going up to here and getting a lot of these same items here. But just right-click on the picture and you get the menu. The next one, files and collections. I already showed you the right-clicking there. When you get a picture, for example, that one there, if I want to edit it in Photoshop, remember under Preferences before, when I had external editing, I had Photoshop set up first, and I had Luminar set up second. This means if I use the shortcut key, Command or Control E, I'll go into Photoshop. If I use the shortcut key, Option, Command, or Control E, I would go into Luminar. So those shortcut keys are good. So if I were to go Command E brings up the dialog to go into Photoshop. All right. Option Command E would bring the same dialog to go into Luminar. Those nice shortcut keys to remember. Another nice shortcut key to remember. So for example, if I wanted to group a series of pictures together, click on the first one, then hold down the Shift key, click on the last one. If I wanted these to be in a group, okay, I could go Command G. Now they're grouped. Okay. If I want to ungroup them, guess what you do? Well, right click, say unstack. So the grouping pictures is good. For example, you have a series of pictures you took for focus stacking, or a series of pictures for HDR. or maybe just whatever your series is, you want the group. Them grouping pictures helps you do some organization. This Command G. Now, in terms of moving between these modules here, if I hit the D will take me to the Develop module and bring in whatever picture I've got. G will go back to the Grid View. As I said before, Loupe is the space key. Okay, I in Loupe will toggle the information panel up here. G will go back to Grid View. So these kind of things are good to do. For some reason, I remember the crop shortcut key in Develop. If I hit R, it brings up the crop tool. I don't really want to do that. I'm going to go hit G, go back to Grid View. Ratings. How do I get the ratings on here? If I want to put ratings on this picture here, if I use 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, it'll give me stars. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. If I use 6, 7, 8, or 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, it'll give me colors. So 1 star, 2 stars, 3 stars, 4 stars, 5 stars, and then 6 will give me red, 7 gives me yellow, 8 gives me green, and the green is what I use for my finished pictures, and 9 gives me purple. And then of course I can click on that color there, say I don't want any color. If I click on this, if I have this picture and I click on 0, it'll zero out the stars. So that is a good item, a good thing to know. And then finally, the two shortcut keys that are important to know when you're trying to cull your pictures, trying to go through all your pictures coming back from a trip and decide what to keep or not keep. What I'll typically do is click on my first picture, hit the space bar, and start looking at my pictures. I can use my right key to go through my pictures, all right, that way. And as I like a picture or not like a picture, I can pick it by hitting the P key. And if you'll look down below here, you'll see, I mean, I could check them down here too. But if I hit P, that means I've picked that picture. If I hit X, that means I've rejected the picture. And I hit U, that means I unflag it, remove the flag. But I use that pick and reject to cull my pictures while I'm traveling, and so that when I come home at the end, I can come back and hit Photo and delete rejected pictures after I've reviewed what I've rejected. And the way you can do that, for example, is if you, let me go to Grid View. Let me go back to Library, Grid View. Let's say I picked a number of pictures here, just for grins. I'm going to reject these pictures. Second, I just hit the wrong key here. Go back. These pictures here, reject them by hitting X. Okay. Now you'll see the little flags show up on these pictures. They're rejected, and they may be scattered all the way through here. But I can go to Filters here and say Flag Pictures. Give me the flag pictures. Come up here, and then I'll click this little flag here and say, give me everything that's been rejected. Now I can go through and review these things and decide whether I really want to reject them. And once I want to do that, I can go to Photo, delete rejected pictures. All right. I won't do that here because I don't want to reject these pictures. Let me go back to here and unflag them. You'll notice they fell off and disappeared because this filter's on here. So let's go and take that filters off. All right, and we've got that. Let's see what else. So pick and reject. And then finally, before we leave out of here, let's say I want to export these pictures. These pictures happen to be JPEGs because they're old camera pictures here. Let me go to something a little bit newer. I got a bunch of things from Australia here. These are TIFFs and PSDs and everything else. But if I want to go through and export some of these pictures to share and learn, for example, let's say I'm going to do some share and learn pictures for some reason. There's a bird. There's Australia something. Okay, so these pictures are going to go to share and learn. And as I do this, something occurs to me that I didn't get to is virtual copies. You notice these little tabs on the end of the some of these pictures over here. Those are virtual copies. And what is a virtual copy and why? Well, virtual copies are a pretty important thing. If I right-click again, I can make a virtual copy. Well, we talked about virtual copies early on, but I can make a virtual copy by selecting that, it'll make the same copy of this one with a little tab on it. This little virtual copy, if when I hit delete on that one, it'll just say remove from Lightroom, right? It doesn't delete it from the disk because there is no actual picture. I just removed it from Lightroom. If I were to do that on a real picture, this is not a virtual copy, I hit delete, it's going to say, do you want to remove it from Lightroom or do you want to delete it from the disk? I don't want to do either in this case. If I want to remove it from Lightroom, it means it'll leave it there, it just won't be in the catalog. If I remove it from the disk, it will delete the picture itself. So virtual copies, the reason I noticed that is I selected these pictures off here. For the export, I'm selecting a virtual copy. Since that's not a real picture, I can still export it any way I want. So if that's my share and learn picture, I can hit export here. And I've set up a share and learn action, if you will. The picture names the picture, my name plus a sequence. And I go down, I'll say, make the image size resize to this 2000 by 2000, resolution 100. Okay, and that's it. So if I were to click export, that picture will, as it goes up here, export that file to the desktop. That's done. And it should be on my desktop somewhere, if I can find it. There it is right down here. So that picture will, and it was a virtual copy, so it wasn't a real picture, DNG, a copy of another picture, and it created a JPEG file out of that. So you can set up the export any way you want. The way to do that, for example, is I can say want to say create a copy of the original. But I want, this is going to add it to the catalog, and it's going to add it to a folder that I want to do later. It's useful for presets. Or I can say, no, put that, I want it on the desktop. Say the desktop. So I'm going to say copy original. But I'm going to modify this. I'm going to put this on the desktop. I don't want it on the catalog because I don't want something on the desktop that's going to go in the catalog. I'll rename the picture. I'll leave it the regular name. I want to just put the original on the desktop because maybe I want to give the original to somebody else or something like that. And that's it. I don't want to do anything else to it. But I want to save this now as a preset. Okay? So I can say add, and I can say original desktop. So if I want to use this particular one, it's under user presets too. If I want to use this particular action again, I can go ahead and do that. And here's the picture. It came out as a DNG since the original was a DNG, and send it to the desktop. And I can now go back and use that same action since I saved it for other times. That's how I made the share and learn. And that's it. Export publishing is similar to that. You go down to the bottom and you move pictures into the public services. So I hope that was interesting to you. On this next module, we'll be talking about the development. First of all, we'll do a little review of the panels around the sides. So look what you're looking at now. Clearly, I'm in the develop module here. The way I got to the develop module from the library module, if I go back to the library module, I pick a picture and I hit D. The shortcut D puts me in the develop module. Okay, now I'm in the develop module. Looking at the left-hand side, we have the Navigator Panel again. The Navigator Panel allows me to do a couple of things. I can zoom in, right? I can move this little zoom point around. So if I'm looking for dust specks in the sky, it's a good way of doing it. Okay, I can go and look at dust specks. There's another way of moving around this particular panel too. If I hit on a Mac, if I hit that little bar up here, for example, let's just go to 300. And if I want to really inspect this thing step by step, I can put this in the top left-hand corner, then holding down the FN key, the function key, and the down arrow on a Windows machine. That would probably just be the down, page up. And I can now page down, as you can see, through this picture. And as I get to the bottom, it'll scroll up to the next area in the top. And now I can inspect this whole picture very carefully. If I'm looking for dust spots, this is a way to do that. And I can go through this whole picture, inspecting it very closely. So that's hitting down the FN and then the down or up keys. On a Windows machine, that would just be the page up, page down keys. So to get back to fit, I'll hit fit. I'm back in the fit area. I can also have fill. So there's different ways you can look at the picture here, right? I can also have control or command minus, or control or command plus will make this thing get bigger or smaller. All right. So that's the Navigator panel on the top. There's presets here. If you'll notice, there are a lot of presets that come with Lightroom. Creative presets, color presets, everything else. And as I scroll over the presets, the picture itself will change to show what the preset does to my picture. Now, all presets really are, is if you'll notice here, these lines are all the controls, the editing sliders are all 0, right? But if I select a preset, for example, I select this bright and I actually click on it, okay, the sliders change. So the presets essentially are just edit positions that have been saved over here. All right. So you can select different presets and the sliders will change on the right hand side as I do this, back and forth to different presets. If I want to see the effect of different presets, I can just roll over them until I like one and say I like one and oh, that's a great one, I love it. Click. Okay. Black and white infrared, for some reason I picked that one. And it shows the result over here. And then as you go, you keep on going down. Snapshots, or you can keep a snapshot of a picture at a particular given time, so that you can say, okay, I like the way it was here, and I want to be able to go back to this position. And so I'll take a snapshot of it here, and I'll keep on editing, and then maybe I want to go back and capture this particular position. It's like putting a bookmark in your edits. Okay, I'll cancel that. History is simply history, what I've done to this picture. So I've done a couple of things here. I imported the picture, reset the thing, so I can go back and say, look, let's bring it back to what it was before I started hitting some of these presets here. Okay, so I'm going to go back to reset settings. I'm back to the picture the way it was when you first saw this, when I first brought it in. Okay, so when I first brought it in, it actually has some edits on it. I've taken those edits off to show you the raw picture here. That's the way you initially saw it. Then I went through showing you some presets. So this history panel lets you go back in time. And then that's it. There's collections here, but you really don't need the collections. That's if you want to move the picture into the collection. That's the left-hand side panel on the develop module. Right-hand side panel will give you some the histogram, which is important. If I click on this original photo here, I can build a smart preview. If I want to edit this later, say I'm halfway through editing, I want to edit this thing later, but I want to disconnect it from the hard drive and walk downstairs with it on my laptop. Okay, I can do that. This gives you some of the camera settings here. It's shot at ISO 200, etc. Then you start getting into the right hand editing workflow. Now we're going to start talking about editing your pictures. I believe it's probably best if I actually go through and edit some pictures in order to explain the editing features in Lightroom. So that's what we'll do. I've got some pictures here that I've selected. First of all, before I go anywhere, I'm going to be talking throughout this process of the differences that you'll see in the editing panels. I'll go to Develop and Edit. Some of these items over here can be different if you are using a RAW file versus using a JPEG file. And I'll be mentioning that several times. You might wonder, why would you use a JPEG file or RAW file? Let me just show you. I've got two images here. One image here that I've got, which is a NEF file. It's a RAW file. It's an overblown. It's a HDR. It's the highly exposed third of the HDR trio. I made a copy of this picture, exactly the same picture, as a JPEG. Okay, so it's the same picture, 32 megapixels. The same picture, same dimensions. I'm going to edit one and then I'll edit the other, okay? But in order to do this, I'm also going to demonstrate how to edit two pictures at the same time. I'll edit the raw picture, and then I'll hit the Control key and also select the JPEG picture. The raw picture is the most selected because it's brightest, so whatever I do to the brightest picture here will also be done to this other picture. So let's edit and try to get as much detail out of this raw picture as I can. Then we'll show you the JPEG and show you the difference. So I'm going to go into the Develop module. and it's picking up the raw file down here. I can see that's the most selected. So this is the raw file. I can look at the basic panel, and just for, we'll talk about these things a little bit more detail when I get into editing pictures, but I'll take it down as much as I can. I can see there is some detail in the sky there. Can you see that? There is detail in the sky. So I can bring back some stuff in the blown out areas. I can just raise the shadows up a little bit if I want to. Bring the highlights way down, bring the exposure back up so I can see something in the foreground. And I start to create a picture that's almost good. You see some blue in the sky over here, see some bumpy clouds. It's not a great picture, but you can see I was able to bring back detail. Now let's see what happened to the JPEG file. Remember, these two files would be edited at the same time. If you look at the slider positions over here, let's go to the JPEG file. Slider position stayed in the same spot, and this is the JPEG. You'll notice there's no detail in the sky. Let's go back to the raw file. There's some detail in the sky. JPEG file, using the same edits, I was not able to capture. I wasn't able to bring back as much. The file's quite flat and uninteresting. So basically what that tells me is there's a lot more detail, there's a lot more information in a raw file than there is in a JPEG file. Okay, that's just one demo of two. I'm going to reset that. That's just a demonstration of why you would want to use a raw file over a JPEG file. Okay, now let's get into a couple of other features here. Merging. Before we get into this, we'll merge a couple of files. This here is a Panorama file. So I'll select the first one, hold down the Shift key, select the last one, and then I can right-click on the group here, and I can select Photo Merge to Panorama. If this were an HDR panorama, for example, if I had 3 brackets of each one of those, I could also do an HDR panorama. This is just a plain panorama. I can get that same result by going up to Photo Merge Panorama. So having selected those pictures, I can go to the panorama and it'll stitch them together. What's nice about this is you'll notice that I was not real steady, and the pictures are not totally, there's blank spaces around the edge of the picture. I can warp the boundary to fill that in. Okay, and that works pretty good. If I don't want to warp it, I can also say fill the edges. It'll now go through and fill the edges. All right, so now it's filled the edges. I've got myself a panorama. All right, you have several choices here. If it looks funny, you can pick the different choices. The first one usually works fine. Okay, you say merge, and these things will all be merged to panorama. The progress is shown up above. So that's one way of merging pictures. Okay, that's one merge process. Let me start another merge process here. The other merge process is HDR. For this picture in Sydney, these 3 pictures here, not the JPEG, but these 2 here and the one down here. So I'll select this picture, hitting down the Control key. I'll select these 2 pictures, and I'll do similar to that I did in the panorama. I'll right-click on it. I'll say Photo Merge, but this time it's Photo Merge HDR. It's going to take the 3 exposures and blend them together. The other thing is still progressing here. We'll see how much power this PC has to have these 2 things going at once. Okay, created the panorama. I mean the HDR. So it has created an HDR image. What's nice about the merge process here with HDR is that the image it does create is now another raw image. I believe it'll be a DNG file when it finishes up. You can see the panorama was created over here, and it is a DNG file, which means it's raw. It has all the data. Remember, raw versus JPEG? It has all the data of the raw file, so I have a lot of leeway in order to edit this picture. I'll also have a lot of leeway in editing this HDR that came out here. Okay, let's go through a typical workflow now. I showed you the photo merge HDR and panorama. I'm going to just take one of the panorama picture here, and I'll use that as an example, and I'll walk through the develop module with that one. So I'm clicking develop. Here's the panorama. If you don't see the entire panorama, remember the navigator up here. It may be showing up part of it, all of it, whatever. You click fit, and you've got the panorama where you want it. You can see by the history panel over here. I've done some stuff before this because I was experimenting before class. I'll turn that off for a second. Now let's go to the panel, the editing panels over here. The basic panel, tone curve, etc. Let's start with basic. This is where I normally start. This would be my workflow. start with a basic panel, and I might check out white balance on this thing. A white balance is probably okay. It's a sunset, but let's see what happens with white balance. There's a couple of things you can do. You can use the auto settings here. All right, and as we go through here, we'll notice there's a lot of different settings that I can use, and the reason for that is that this is a raw file. If you'll notice down here, it's a DNG file. Okay, it's the panel DNG file. If I did the same, if I looked at white balance, and let's go back to the library where I used one of the JPEG files. This file here is a JPEG. We did that before. If we go back to the develop module with that JPEG file and look at white balance, you'll notice there's not that much. So one of the differences again with JPEG and RAW is that you don't, in the JPEG file, you don't get all the options you do in RAW. The reason for that is your camera is already set. In a JPEG file, it's processed by your camera. So your camera has already set the white balance according to what selection you made in the camera. In a RAW file, it didn't select white balance. Okay, that's one of the differences between RAW and JPEG. Let's go back to our panorama pictures, and I can go through and select one of these. If I hit auto, it'll turn a little bit bluer. I don't particularly like that. It's a sunset picture. I can go through here and see what it does to the pictures, and it may not do what I like. A little bit yellower there, that's nice. And shade will also give me a yellow tone to the picture. That's not too bad. I'll leave it that way. The other way to do white balance is doing a select using the side dropper and picking something on this picture that's a neutral gray. Neutral gray might be this bridge. This is a brown bridge, but maybe it's supposed to be neutral gray. I don't know. If I click on it, you'll see that the picture changes quite a bit. It changes whatever I click on into a neutral gray, and then balances everything else out. Again, it made it too uniform, so I don't like this. This particular picture doesn't have a good spot to pick for neutral gray. It could be this little trailer over here that does a little bit better. Okay. So I'll settle for that as white balance right now. Next thing I do is look at exposure, and looking up here, the picture looks pretty well balanced, whites and blacks. So exposure doesn't look too bad. Highlights, I'm going to bring down the highlights because I'm trying to bring back detail in the sky a little bit and make the sky more dramatic. So I'll bring down the highlights. In doing that, you notice the rest of the picture gets slightly more dark. I'll bring up the shadows, which will bring up the foreground a little bit. Okay. So now I've made some changes. I can see what the changes are by hitting the slash key, backward slash. So here's the before, here's the after. So as I progress through this thing, I can try to see what it looks like by hitting that backward slash key. In terms of blacks and whites, setting a black point and a white point is important. Now this picture is not too bad, but as I go back and forth, you look at the histogram up above. If I take the white point up, the little arrow up above will light up when it gets blown out. Okay, so one way to set the white point is go up until just that blows out and then back off a little bit. Okay, the other one in black point, you'll do the same thing. The arrow will blow out and go back off a little bit. The other way to do that is to do the same thing with the white and black points, but use your option key. Hold down the option key while you do it. Go up until you start to see something blow out and then back off a little bit. Okay. You're setting the white and black points. Now, why would you want to do that? The reason you want to do that is you want to get the most range out of your picture as possible, the most dynamic range you can. So I'm setting black and white points here. Got a little bit too much white on that. I don't like what I see there, so I'm going to back off a little bit on the white point. Okay, so now I've set white and black points. Texture. This picture doesn't have a lot of texture to it, but if it did, I could add a little more texture to the picture. A lot of pictures do, especially if there's rock faces and stuff. Because the light is so dark in this picture, you're not going to see a lot of that. Clarity, if I run it up and down, you'll see what happens. I will usually add a little bit of texture and a little bit less of clarity to a picture, but almost all my pictures have some texture and clarity to them. Dehaze, this picture has some haze in the background, but that haze adds dimension to the picture. So I'm not sure I really want to put too much dehaze on that picture, because the haze does add dimension to the picture. So I'm going to just put very slight dehaze. Vibrance is always good. Saturation, not so much. Tone curve, this particular picture, again, I may or may not need it, but usually a slight S curve is good on a picture. Gives it nice contrast. I'll leave it there. If you want to see the before and after, there's always every one of these controls has a little toggle switch up above, so I can see what I did with that S curve there. Okay, before and after. That's before. That's after. HSL. HSL is the hue, saturation, and luminance. Hue, saturation, and luminance. I can darken and lighten certain areas of this picture based on what I do here. So, for example, luminance. If I want these blues up here to be darker, I can take this little slider position. I can also move the blue here, but I can take this little slider and move it over. And using that slider on the blue, move the blue down, and it'll make it darker or lighter. Okay. If I want to lighten or darken other parts of the sky, I can do the same thing by going over the, say, for example, these yellows and darken them down a little bit. So I'm bringing out a little bit more detail and interest in the sky. To see what I did there with hue saturation, I can turn that on and off. Okay, that's some things. Color grading is overall grading of the picture. We won't get into that right now, but when we look at black and whites, I'll show that. Well, you can do this also for regular picture. Pictures like this too. Detail. Here's another area where you can see difference between JPEG and RAW pictures. This is a RAW picture, DNG file, as we talked about before. So it has some sharpening already applied to it. And why is that? Well, if it's a RAW file, the camera does not do any processing to it, so it has no sharpening. On a JPEG file, on the other hand, if I go to JPEG here, okay, pick up a JPEG file. A JPEG file, if I go to develop, it has no sharpening applied. It's zero sharpening, because Lightroom assumes that the camera has applied sharpening to it already, so that this has already been sharpened. So another difference between RAW and JPEG is down here in the sharpening area, where RAW files will have sharpening applied, JPEG's not. Now I can sharpen the heck out of this picture, and I probably should. I'll run it up to about 80. That's more sharpening, but I don't want sharpening to be in the sky. The reason I don't want sharpening to be in the sky is because, as you can see here, there's noise. Okay, so how do I reduce the sharpening in the sky while keeping the sharpening in the foreground? Well, I use this little mask feature here. I hold down the Option key, okay, and as I do hold down the Option key, I slide the mask. What is black is not sharpened. What is white is sharpened. So as I go through this, you'll see that the sky is not being sharpened, but down below, along the edge of the hills and the buildings and everything else is being sharpened. So that's what I want. You'll also notice something here when I do that, is that there's a lot of spots in the sky. That's probably dust but the lens dust. We'll talk about removing lens dust in a little while. Noise reduction. Now that I've sharpened it, I want to reduce some of the noise. There is not too much noise now in this thing, because that was showing the sky before. But I can always hit a little noise reduction. I'll put a little noise reduction on this thing. So I've got the picture close to what I want. Lens correction. This did not have, most of my images when I import them, I have lens correction enabled, and it applies it on import. This one I didn't. So I hit enable profile corrections. There was a slight change, and it picks up my Nikon lens that I used here and applied the correction to it. Remove chromatic aberration. That's the aberration that you would normally see along a horizon line or edge of a building, sharp building, where there's light bright behind it and dark in front. And I don't see particularly any. It's a purple fringe. If you see chromatic aberration, it's a purple fringe, and I don't see a purple fringe here, but that's what that would be there. If you see a little purple fringe along something, you click remove the chromatic aberration, it would remove that fringe. Transform. Command minus will zoom out. Command plus will zoom in. So I'm zooming out. I'm going to hit the fit button here. Transform would just straighten this picture out if it needed straightening. This one doesn't look like it, but if I hit auto, well, let's see what it does. Really don't like that. So let's hit guided, and let's say we want to say that's going to be the horizon line there. It's very hard to tell how to straighten this picture out. So I'm not really going to do that. If I were to do that, I'd hit what I thought the horizon line was. Then I'd also find a vertical. Say, for example, that vertical there. until it corrected it slightly. And say, okay, that's how you straighten out a picture. If you had two verticals, for example, if you had a building that was leaning in, you could straighten out the building that way. That's what transform does. And constrained crop just says as you warp this picture, crop the picture to not show the warped edges. Effects, what I typically do in almost all my pictures, I'll have a little vignetting, darkening the corners of the pictures in a little bit. And that's about it for those. Those are all global. All those changes I made there were global changes. They affected the entire picture. There's a couple more things, though, I can do. For example, I think the background is too... let me hit done here to get rid of these transform lines. Done. The foreground's still too dark, and I could put a little bit more yellow and sunset on that sky. I'll think what I'll do is I'll use this gradient tool up here. And for the gradient tool, I'll set the gradient tool roughly along the horizon here and drag downwards. Now leave it about there. Gradient tool. Let's see. I can rotate it around by pulling one of these edges here. Okay. So I'm going to put a gradient right along this area here. I might run it up just a touch. What I'm going to do with that gradient is I'm going to increase exposure. Now you see it's increasing exposure on the wrong side. It's up above. I don't want that. I want the exposure on the bottom side. So I can flip this around. And my little mouse is very, very sensitive. So I'm flipping this gradient around a little bit. Now if I run exposure up, I can lighten up the foreground a little bit. And that's nice. I'll bring the highlights down in the foreground, but I will bring the shadows up in the foreground. Okay. Now I've been able to see what this gradient does. Yeah, that's great. Now I've got the foreground fixed up a little bit brighter. Now let's fix up the sky. You can add several gradients. I'll put another gradient on the sky. This one is going to be start here and then go down. And I'm going to darken the sky a little bit, run the exposure down a little bit. Okay, I'm darkening the exposure. I might even increase the yellows a little bit and magentas. Okay, the trouble is, of course, if you look here, the mountains and the building have been affected also. That's what this range mask is for. So I'll put range mask on. I could pick either color, in other words, it would only darken or lighten certain colors that I picked on. So if I hit color, for example, I could say, well, give me a range mask only darken or lighten certain colors out here. Okay, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to use luminance because the foreground is darker and the background is lighter. I have show luminance mask on. If I have show it off, you won't see that red on there. Right now, because luminance mask is on, I can see that it's being applied across those mountains there. I don't really want that, so I take this range down here and get the darker area, the darker part of the range, and start backing that off. And you'll see the mountains are now not being applied. Okay, as I back off, so I'm not. The luminance is now hitting the sky, but not the foreground as much. I keep on going up, and that's about right. That's not too bad. So I like that. I'll say that's good. That's good. Yeah, I like that. So I'll say done. So that range mask hit here. But the trouble is it did hit the building too. And I can take it off the building by erasing part of that, but we'll leave it alone for now. So that's essentially doing some local adjustments. The other kind of local adjustment that I like to do a lot of times is using the radial filter. This is radial filter right up here. For example, I could put a little bit more sunshine or something on these mountains. A little glow of evening. If I wanted to. Run the exposure up just a touch. Whoop, and you'll see the whole image is getting brighter except the mountains. The reason for that is I have to invert this mask. So now if I run the exposure up, I can put a little bit more light on that mountain. I might even put a little bit more yellow on the mountain since it's evening. And I've got a little sun hitting the mountain over there. So that's the kind of things that you can do as you go through here and do your adjustments. The before and after, slash key. There's the before, and there's the after. Okay, so that's a walkthrough of a typical edit function and showing you all the functions on the left here. Now let's just do some experimenting here. If I go up to the basic panel, okay, and click on black and white. Before I click on black and white, you see there's no black and white panels down here. But once I click on black and white, all of a sudden I've got a black and white panel here. Okay, and what that allows me to do is I can change, I can lighten and darken certain things based on color here. So for example, the sky had a lot of yellows and oranges in it, so I can go and darken down certain areas and keep other areas light, and change my black and white picture by adjusting the colors here. Blues didn't have much effect. Aqua's probably not either. There's a lot of yellow in this picture. But if it were a blue sky, you could make quite a difference. So yeah, that way you're able to tone your black and white pictures. And if you like to do a little duotoning to the picture, this is where you can get them into color grading and say, for example, I'd like to do shadows, put some yellows into the shadows here. You see I'm turning in a little bit of sepia color. Midtones, let's just go some blues on the midtones. Overall gradient highlights, midtones, this is probably overall. Let's just do that, and I'll play around with the balance now, back and forth, getting a different tone on the picture. So that's how you can bring duotones and colors back into your black and white and give it a certain feel. So now you've got a picture that's quite different. So there you go, back to the library. There's our finished picture, and that's it. Now let's go one more area. On that final area, I'd like to talk about spot removal. I remember earlier we'd looked at this panorama, and I think we noticed that there were some spots on it. Let's take it into develop. And spots a lot of times will come from sensor dust. Really can't see it much here, and I probably wouldn't go too far on this thing. But let's look and see what it is. I'm going to use the spot removal tool on the top up here. Click on that, and when I do that, down below I get an option here to visualize spots, and I can move the slider back and forth to help me visualize some of those spots here. You can see right here that it looks like we've got some spots from the sensor on this thing. So we'd like to remove some of those spots, and how's the best way to remove that? Well, Navigator Panel up here is your friend in this particular case. Let's go to 200%. That's good. I'm zoomed way in. I'll go up and put this thing in the top left corner or someplace like that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to carefully search this whole image for spots. And I have the spot removal visualized up. Now, a Windows machine and an Apple machine are going to be slightly different on how you do this. A Windows machine, you probably use the page up and page down to move this little box down the screen and up. What I'm going to do is zigzag back and forth looking for spots. In a Windows machine, I think you use page up and page down. In Apple, you use the FN key and then the up and down key. So if I hold down FN and then down, you'll see that little box will move down one. So I can move down looking for spots, looking for things to fix. And as it reaches the bottom here, it'll jump to the next column and move over. So I can quickly go through and scan this whole image looking. Now if I remember right, there weren't many spots on this side of the image, so I'm going to just be more quick about this thing. Move over here to where I thought that I saw some spots. In fact, I just happened to see one right here. That's what a spot looks like right there. Now it's the way this one's buried in the clouds and stuff, you're not going to see much. But get the spot removal tool, so it's about the size of this, a little bit bigger than the spot. Click on the spot. It'll select another place to replace the spot from. Think a little bit, and it's done the replacement. Now I can continue doing the FN down, searching for more spots. As I go down, of course I'm down in the water area. I'll jump up again. Here's another spot. And you progress this way as you go along, looking for spots. So remember that your Navigator box over in the left-hand column is your friend here to help you search the sky using that little down key. Let me see, I just think I saw something there. There's another spot right there. So that's the way you do that. And then when you're finished, you've got a nice clean picture. You can turn the visualize spots off or on. Let's go one more time. Find ourselves another spot. I think I saw one there, but I want a nice one that looks up, looks very formidable, so that we can look what it looks like. There's a spot over here. All right, that spot there, if I turn the visualize spots off, what's it look like? You can see it's a little smudge mark. So by the time I finish this thing, I can hit fit, and I've got myself a nice clean picture. Okay, this is the last thing we'll talk about now. Now that we went through all the difficult parts of editing, did step by step through all these different panels, I'm going to show you that it's a lot easier way to do that. And this is what I typically do. I use some of the automated settings here. The first things I typically do when I look at an image is I'll use the profiles up here and this auto button down here. Let's start with profiles. Under profiles, the nice thing with profiles, there's something else called presets over here that you can use, and I'll use all three of these things here. Profiles are like presets, except they don't change any of these buttons, and I'll show you what I mean by that. There's a bunch of different kinds of profiles. You can browse. You can use the browse button here, or you can use this little icon over here to browse through the profiles. And as you roll over them, you'll see the picture change. Okay. For a landscape picture like this, I'll typically use Adobe Landscape. So I can go through these things. I can scroll through them. Okay. I've got my favorites. These are my favorites here. The way you set a favorite, for example, is if you like one, let's go to artistic, for example, and I say I really don't like that one, but let's just say I like that one. I would star it. I would hit the little star, and it would go into my favorites above. So these are the ones I would typically pick from. If you go down below here, there's something called let's see, camera matching. This matches your camera, and I use a Nikon D810. The camera usually has some profiles in it that you can select, and these will match your camera. And what this does is, since these are raw files, they're not processed by the camera. So you're picking one here that you would like to start with. It gives you a good starting point. Let's just pick Adobe Landscape. All right. So we've picked Adobe Landscape as a profile. It says now Adobe Landscape up here, and you can see the pictures have been changed, and none of the controls have been changed. If I had used a preset instead, and I probably can use a preset, I can go to the presets here. And what the presets will do is I go through these. Okay, I can pick a let's say I'll pick some of the, let's say, the natural preset or whatever I want to do, contrast, high detail. Okay, let's take this high detail preset, and I'll click on it and watch the buttons on the right. They change. So the presets will change these controls, and essentially what a preset is, it's a saved edit, a saved set of edits. I'm going to go into history and undo that preset. Okay, we'll go back to our initial profile that we set. All right, and so now we're back to where we were before. All the buttons are zeroed out. The next thing I would typically do on a picture after picking up the profile would be go to auto. So I'll hit auto, and auto will do the initial setup, and it's based on Adobe Sensei, I believe it is. It's Adobe's AI software to make intelligent choices. So the auto tone, the profile, and the presets are three automatic things you can do to get into editing. And now at this point, of course, you can go through and edit anything you want. You can start doing different things, bringing down the highlights a little bit more. Certainly for this picture here, I would get rid of that awful dust spot or whatever that is up there. So that's it. That's the automatic pieces. Don't forget this.